DJI have made it super duper easy to shoot hyperlapses, but not just hyperlapses, 5.5K RAW hyperlapses, which is just freaking insane. Now, hyperlapses would have to be one of the coolest filmmaking techniques I have ever discovered, mainly because it's just like a different perspective that a lot of people usually don't see. And I wouldn't say they're easy to do, but with all the new advancements in technology, they're becoming a lot easier to do. And you know, everyday people can do hyperlapses as well. Like if I think back to when I first saw someone with a drone, that first day I saw someone standing on the beach, you know, flying this little micro helicopter plane thing, and you could see an image on a screen that was being transmitted from the drone. I was like, I just could not believe that this technology existed. So now with the Mavic 2 Pro, DJI have made it super duper easy to shoot hyperlapses, but not just hyperlapses, 5.5K RAW hyperlapses, which is just freaking insane. But the full workflow to actually making a RAW hyperlapse from start to finish can be a little bit daunting for a lot of people. So most people just kind of like ignore it or don't actually know about it and just let the drone compile the hyperlapse itself, and you get okay results. But the main problem with not shooting RAW hyperlapses is that you are limited to a 1080p compressed video file. And by not shooting RAW, you aren't actually utilizing the full capabilities of that beautiful 1-inch sensor that the Mavic 2 Pro has, and you also have no control over how smooth the final hyperlapse is actually gonna look. So now if we compare the internally made hyperlapse to the edited RAW version, you can see what the benefits are straight away. There is way more color, way more dynamic range, a wider field of view, and we can also control how smooth the overall hyperlapse is as well. Now for this tutorial, I am gonna be editing in Premiere Pro and Lightroom, but most of this stuff should translate to other software as well. All right, so the first thing we need to do is actually go out and shoot a hyperlapse, so let's go and do that right now. So the first thing we need to do once we get our drone up in the air is make sure we have Save Original Hyperlapse toggled on and select RAW. Next, make sure we're in video mode, then go into our smart fly modes and then choose hyperlapse. So now with hyperlapses, there are actually a few different modes that you can choose from, but 98% of the time I'll always choose course lock. It just seems to work the best for me. Course lock basically locks the drone in one direction and will just keep flying until the hyperlapse is completed. Feel free to play around with the other modes as well. Like I have tried them out, but again, I've just got the best results when using that course lock method. Once we've chosen our method, we have a few things to set up. Firstly, the interval is the time between each picture or frame. The video length is how long the final video will be, and the speed is how fast the drone will fly at a constant rate. I typically leave all these at the default and then just play around with the speed. If you want to shoot a hyperlapse or capture something over a great distance, then that's fine, you put the speed up to 7.2 kilometers an hour. But if you're just kind of doing something short or something small, like in distance I mean, then that's why you do the 1.8 kilometers an hour. Or you can go anywhere in between, just kind of play around with it and figure out which one works best for you. So now we can set up our drone shot and click on the arrow on the right, and this will lock our course. Then we just need to press go and the drone will do its thing. Now the reason that I don't actually set the video length is because when you're actually shooting the hyperlapse, you can choose this little clock icon and this will add 1 second to the final video. And you can do this at any time throughout the hyperlapse. Another really cool function here is if you click on the map on the bottom left, it will show you where the starting and ending points are. I actually use this all the time with satellite maps to make sure that I'm not going to end up in a building or flying over somewhere I'm not supposed to be. And again, if you extend the hyperlapse by clicking that little clock icon, then it will actually update in the map as well. Once the hyperlapse is complete, we just need to wait for it to be synthesized or combined, and then that's it. Now, a couple of things to note when you are shooting hyperlapses is to think with a similar mindset to if you are shooting a time lapse. You really want something in the frame that is moving, similar to if you're shooting a time lapse, because once you make the hyperlapse, this is going to exaggerate that movement even more. So think like clouds, people, or cars. Like for instance, this hyperlapse I took flying over some fog. You can clearly see that the fog is flowing over the mountains because it's sped up time and it looks freaking sick. And also be aware to not fly when it's too windy as well, because the windier it is, the less smooth the end hyperlapse is gonna be. All right, so now I've actually shot the hyperlapse. We need to download all the files onto the computer so we can actually edit it. If we go into the DCIM folder, then 100 media, you'll find the compiled hyperlapse that DJI gives you in here as an MP4 file. But we also want to get the raw images and compile it ourselves. So we need to go back out to the hyperlapse folder and copy this folder over to our computer. Now keep in mind that every single time you shoot a hyperlapse, DJI automatically names the first image Hyperlapse 0001, and then goes from there. But the problem with this is that every single hyperlapse you shoot is gonna have that exact same file name, and there is a potential for the files to get mixed up in the editing software. So I would highly recommend renaming these files or adding something to the start of the name, just so you can actually differentiate and just so the computer can differentiate it from all the other hyperlapses that you're shooting. So now the next step is to actually edit up the RAW file. So I'm gonna use Adobe Lightroom, but again, you can use any software that can actually handle those raw DNG files. In Lightroom, I'll just drag this folder in and add the files. Now we can just select one of the images and start to do the edit. The main benefits of shooting RAW is we retain way more detail and dynamic range, so we can pull back the highlights and boost the shadows while still having a high resolution image. Now in reality, because the Mavic 2 Pro has a 20 megapixel sensor, we can actually realistically get a 5.5K hyperlapse out of this, which is just freaking insane. Once we've edited the images to our liking, we just select all and then choose sync. This will sync all the adjustments to all the images in the hyperlapse. Now this process may actually take some time, so just be patient with this. And once that's completed, we need to export these out. I usually just export as a high resolution JPEG and it works fine for me. So now we've edited up and exported out all the individual images, we can now bring it into Premiere Pro and we can start putting it together. Alrighty, so now in Premiere Pro, we need to bring in these edited files, and then we can basically just grab this folder and drag it into a new sequence, and then we've got our hyperlapse here. But you can notice that each of the actual images is very, very long. So they're like, for me, it's 5 seconds long per image, but this is a very easy thing to fix. So basically we just select them all, right click and choose speed duration. And then if we come up to here, we just go duration and change this to 1 frame, because that's how we want it to be. And we also need to select ripple edit shifting trailing clips as well. So click that, press OK. And now if we zoom in, we can see that all of them are 1 frame each, and we should be able to play it if my computer doesn't die. We can see that we now have the hyperlapse here. Now this obviously wasn't the best conditions to shoot this hyperlapse, and it was quite windy. So you can see when I actually play it back, that it is quite like bobbling up and down. So again, if you are shooting a hyperlapse, make sure that it's not so windy, because then we get a smoother result. Alright, so now we've imported this, we need to actually stabilize it, but we can't just add a stabilization onto the individual images. We do need to nest it. So how I'm going to do that is I'm actually going to make a new sequence, because I don't need 5.5K. I'm going to make it a 4K hyperlapse. So I've got a 4K preset here, but if you go up to settings, you can set this to 4K, so 3840 by 2160. And we'll call this 4K hyperlapse. And then we can actually drag in that 5.5K hyperlapse here. So we got that, and we just scaled to frame size, and then just bring it up a little bit until 117, until it fits the frame out. And now we've actually got that sequence nested, so now we can apply a warp stabilizer to this. So if we come over to effects, and we go warp stabilizer, drag that on, and then we just need to let it do its thing. Now this does take some time, because you have to remember that the original files that it's actually analyzing are 5.5 or 20 megapixel files per image. So I think last time I did this, it took about 7 or 8 minutes. So depending on how powerful your computer is, will depend on how long this process takes. But just let it do its thing, go grab a coffee or go do something else while it's doing it. And then we come back, we'll be able to actually see how well it's done. Alright, so now the warp stabilizer has finished, we can see there's an auto scale, and it shouldn't be too much. If it is a lot, like if it's like 120% of height, then something seriously went wrong. And that might be if you're trying to stabilize like one of those free moving hyperlapses or something. Typically I only do this when I'm actually doing a core stock one, because it actually has stuff to stabilize. So now if we try play this back, it might not, I don't think it's gonna work on my computer, because my computer's not that good. Let's see if I can get it to play it back. It's a little bit glitchy. If your computer is a bit slow, then just go to the end and then press O, and then it'll set like a little area, and then go sequence render into out, and just let this do its thing, and it'll basically just kind of like render out what you've got in the sequence, and then you can play it back. It's smooth. Alright, so now it's finished, we can see that it's actually playing back a lot smoother. It's not full res, but we don't actually need it to be. And you can see as well, there's those like up and down bobbing movements. Like it's done a pretty good job of it. Optimal conditions are no wind or little to no wind, and on this day it was actually quite windy. But you can see kind of the movement of the waves that are coming in, the people on the beach. And if there were some clouds in the sky as well, you'd obviously get all that movement and it would just look sick. But now again, if we compare the internally combined hyperlapse to our finished version, you can see just how much of a difference it makes. Like, it is night and day. This is just so much better and such a better option to go for. Now, while shooting this tutorial, obviously it wasn't the best conditions, but I'll show you the type of hyperlapses you can get if you shoot at the optimal time. So guys, if you did enjoy this tutorial, then consider liking and subscribing, and be sure to share this with anyone that you know that wants or needs to learn how to do drone hyperlapses. And as always guys, stay creative and just be you. See ya.